let's see. All right, let's honor everybody's time, because I know Tom and Molly are on the clock, so to speak, at the office. And Tom is his new title. We've had him here frequently as the director of our parks department for the county, Snohomish County. But his new title involves being the head of the Conservation and Natural Resources Department, which has widened really his whole sphere. And he'll probably speak a little bit to that tonight too, in terms of that. And Molly is our new person. You know, we used to be quite close to Lisa, and she's moved on, and she's the new energy and environmental sustainability manager for the county. And so she's learning all about those septic tanks and the what are some of the other things, that the recycling that goes on at the county fair. And there were a lot of hats that went into what went on in that particular venue. So part of which has been a budget. And we heard when we talked to the people from the planning department that the comprehensive plan has tried to put some more things on into your realm and on your plate, which delights us actually, because I think it's landing where it needs to, and going in a direction that we need for sustainability, climate sustainability. First of all, I want to welcome everybody back. It's just so good to see all of your faces. I missed all the ice and snow. As you guys knew, we went to Palm Springs. It was not quite the holiday we expected, because my husband got very sick. And so I saw a lot of medical professionals and the inside of hospitals, but it was warm. and I did dive into the pool on Christmas Day. So it was 80 degrees. So it was a little bit different than you were experiencing up here. So with all of that said, Tom, I take it that you're going to be the start of this, and I would like to turn it over to both of you, and then honor your time. You can stay through our whole meeting, which we have quite a bit on our plate, or you can just after we've had our question period and we start into our reports, you can slip away and do what the rest of your agenda for the day calls for. All right.
Okay, well then, thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, Tom Tiegen, Director of DCNR here with Snohomish County. Yeah, and what kind of time do we really have? Because clearly, you know, we have a lot going on, and I can cover all kinds of things, but I do want to honor your time in general. So do you want me to keep stuff to maybe 10 minutes and Molly another 10, 15 minutes? What kind of timeline are we on?
Generally, our speakers use up the first 30, 40 minutes, and then we have questions. And then our last hour is more of our general committee work and so forth. But you do what feels comfortable to you, because I know there's a lot that's new and you need to maybe get us on board.
Okay, all righty. So yeah, that sounds great. DCNR was formed a couple of years ago. It was really fully thought of by Executive Dave Summers for a number of years. He talked about how do we coalesce a broader approach to environmental protection, environmental integrity, climate resiliency, how our Parks Department works, and the integration with surface water, how we look at all of our natural spaces. Do we have a strong interface with the 19 cities and towns? Do we have a strong interface then, with SWIS, that's the Skagit-Whatcom Island, Snohomish County group, as well as through PSRC? We have all these different layers. And when we talked about creating the department, even just in... Hi, Kate, it worked. I think that might have been Kate. Well, I'm not sure. But anyways, And even just in the Puget Sound, when Dave and I and some of the council members were talking about, there's like 78 different nonprofit and governmental, quasi-governmental entities that work with the Salish Sea on preservation, salmon recovery, habitat stewardship. Same thing holds true when we get into the uplands between the 3 state agencies we work a lot with, state parks, state DNR, Fish and Wildlife. Then you've got the Forest Service, which you meet every 2 weeks. And then you've got just hundreds of players in that space, more than 70 in our county alone, that are tied to either preservation, tied to recreation, tied to habitat stewardship. And so we really talked about what things could we put in place as a new department of DCNR, which combines SWIM, combines parks, climate, energy, the sustainability office, and the agriculture office. We know that historically, over the last decade or two, one of our biggest arguments internally or between groups has been, how do we do salmon recovery work and the river lifeways in areas that for the last 150 years, we've had a huge amount of agricultural growth, and we've done a lot of diking and a lot of manipulation of river systems and the natural environment in order to facilitate that. So for many years, at least the last several years, we've seen more and more conflict between how we preserve and protect ag and increase it, increase food security, increase production, increase those kind of things, while enhancing salmon habitat and recovery efforts, while still providing some level of recreation, and then working heavily with our tribal partners on what does that mean? What does that look like? And then when you have this overarching theme of energy, sustainability, climate resiliency, this whole portfolio that really has almost no bounds, it touches, its tentacles go everywhere. They go into everything that the county does. From fleet to how we're handling our, how separate entities handle their wastewater, to how all of these things connect. So it was really fun in the creation of this and kind of helping put that together. And again, I would say Executive Summers really fully led that effort. It had to come from the executive's office. These are all executive branch departments. A lot of outreach to council. Council ultimately fully supported that. There's those questions when you're combining things. What does that do? We have, I think, 18 different union addendums tied just to this department now, all these different working groups. How do you coalesce vision, mission, create structure, and make it really, really efficient? Because government has its own weight. As you all know, there's a lot of structure to it, and trying to streamline and move things forward and adapt quickly isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do in the form of that, in that structure. So we've been working at it really hard. We think there's been some really great dividends paying off. One thing is we are all very supportive of each other's grant opportunities. We are pushing that out within multiple counties and with the state and even federally. I will say we've been incredibly successful in the last 18 months, and we hope to continue to be in this legislative session, as well as other federal investments over the next 2, 3, 4 years. There's a lot of infrastructure dollars and other things that are coming into play. And so like floodplains by design, we're working with them. So that's combining some of our partner groups, the Conservation District, WCU Extension, some of our other nonprofit partners, some of our other, some of the business leaders and people that want to co-invest along with our cities. Yesterday, Patty Marie was down at the port. She had that event going on. We had Rick Larson out at Meadowdale last Friday, doing the walkabout on kind of how that's finishing up. We've already had Maria Cantwell down there, Susan Delbene, Kim Schreier, our federal delegation. And it is different with Patty Marie now, because she is in a different position with the security detail. And so even pulling those things together now is a much more difficult proposition. But we have our federal delegation is absolutely committed to and looking at co-investing in what we're doing on the Salish Sea and environmentally here in Western Washington for sure and beyond. So that's good news. We also have significant connectivity with our state legislators. Both R's and D's are very active in the space. They understand the interplay, and we've been able to work with them closely. And I'll be down in Olympia a handful of days here during the session. Stephanie Wright, I should let you know, so Stephanie, former council member, is now a policy analyst in the executive branch. Stephanie and I talk a lot about the various initiatives that are coming out of DCNR. She's been down at the legislature starting last Sunday or a week ago Sunday, and really is going to be staying down there quite a bit at the time. Again, most of us will be going down, department heads and others, for a handful of days, spending time with legislators. There's typically lobby type days, and I think League of Women Voters actually participates in some of those. And you know, I do say, and I think you all would probably agree with this, that really the majority of the work with our state legislators happens year round, and they need to be out, you know, kind of touching projects and seeing projects getting done and why they're important, and understanding that really strong connectivity on the local level of how important they are. And we've had many of them out to Meadowdale Beach, many up to Kayak, many out to other surface water sites. And so bottom line right now, I can say that we've probably been the most successful we've been in my 16 years here as a department director in securing funding, both federally and from the state level. So Meadowdale was a great nexus. It was a great way to tie a whole bunch of things together. And I would be remiss if I didn't actually give a shout out to BNSF. This is, you know, the first time in my 39-year career now in Parks and Recreation and working with counties and cities and park districts, that we've been able to have a successful relationship that's lasted multiple years and ultimately ended up in replacing a 6-foot tunnel, a very restrictive tunnel culvert under the railway, and going to 110-foot trestle. That's really opened a lot of doors and conversations up and down the West Coast on what that might look like. BNSF is still not very non-committal. They don't really want to get into the habit of doing this type of project per se, but we made it as painless as we could. We created a great relationship with the West Coast offices, and we're able to make it happen. So we're trying to figure out how can we emulate that multiple other places on the Salish Sea. There's many Meadowdales just on the Salish Sea, let alone the West Coast. So we're trying to figure out, can we continue, this process? Tulalip tribes were actively involved. A number of other folks around the Salish Sea have been involved. So, right now we're basking in the glow of getting Meadowdale done, which was the project that could never happen and had been talked about for more than 25 years. And Darrell Williams and Ryan Miller were out and talking about it the other day. That was the front page of the Seattle Times. That does not happen very often for something in Snohomish County to be the front page of the Seattle Times. So, and the only other thing I'd want to mention about Meadowdale is the other key thing, and you will all notice it if you go down and visit, is we now have absolutely a safe and ADA accepted way to get across to the water. We've been really talking about salmon recovery and habitat stewardship and doing all of this really to benefit the habitat and the salmon and those efforts. But it also was critically important for us to actually create or perfect a way for people to get down to the Sound, to the Salish Sea safely. Virtually every time I went out to Meadowdale during the summer, someone was trying to cross the tracks. Something was going on with the tunnel. It wasn't quite great. Certainly many times of the year that was blocked. So I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of time on that one. I apologize, but it's a victory lap, because this has been about a 12-year effort, and to have it actually happen was really in doubt even to the last minute. The railroad strike, other things. I will tell you that Maria Cantwell and Rick Larson and Patty Murray all invested a lot of time. They even delayed that strike at one point based on the fact that we had a 24-hour closure planned. And to BNSF's credit, they ended up allowing us 3 24-hour closures of those lines. 4 years ago, we were told the max we would get was a 6-hour. And we really realized that you couldn't construct it. It would added probably about $11 million in cost at that time to having to mob and demob, with the biggest window being 6 hours. So I really can't give BNSF enough credit, and they don't want the credit. It's very interesting. We really wanted to upplay this as being, hey, this is the best way. You got paid. They got paid for everything they did. There's no harm to them, but they could be it could be a whole new environmental standard of how do they approach, environmental issues on main lines, because this is the main line to Chicago. So 24-hour closures, again, 5-6 years ago was impossible. Don't talk about, we're never going to do it. And I just want everybody on this call to know, at the end of the day, they had to basically volunteer that. We couldn't force them into anything, but they did, through the West Coast and then the back East offices, approve 3 24-hour closures. And that is the only way we could complete this project. So I will always be indebted to them for that piece. Plenty of other things I don't agree with them on, but they made it happen here. So that's cool. So what I want to send you to, though, for sure, you guys, is if you just type in like Snohomish County Parks Planning, we do a bi-monthly update on all of our projects. That is something that we get to the executive's office, every other month, and we do it about mid-month. So right now, the one for November, December went live a couple days ago. It goes up to the exec's office. It's out online, and then we also get it to council and do a little update at council. But so on all the parks projects, that is available. Every other month, there is an update on whatever it is, 60, 70 different projects going on. Now, clearly, many of these are multi-year projects, so it doesn't change dramatically, every 2 months. But we do want the public to know, and especially folks like you that are very interested in what's going on and how it's happening, when it's happening. That's a great tool for you to have anytime. Just check it out, Snohomish County Parks Planning. It'll take you to that site. And then you can actually, I think, be put on a mailing list to get that, an email sent to you every couple of months when it's coming out. Surface Water is doing the same thing. They've done it for a handful of years, kind of a quarterly update. We've asked that to be a little more public facing in the last year or two, and more available, and talk about a little broader scope. Because they are a utility. They very much live under that world of what utilities can and cannot do. But we now put that out, a quarterly update through SWIM, which gives a lot of great information on their projects and things going on. Molly, it's already 10:18, so I don't want to take too much more time. We've been really successful so far this past year, working hard with legislators. I think federally, we ended up with, between us and Tulalip tribes and a few other partners, that we all kind of coalesced a vision and kept pushing for each other, signing on to each other's grants and signing on to other initiatives. We're probably up at about 51 million over the next couple of years, behind them, that will be coming into county projects. Some that Tulalip is leader on private property, or the Snohomish tribe. We co-work with them on those. Some that are on our properties. And some of those are really big. We also work the combination of the ag portfolio. We've had properties that are along our river systems that we've been looking at for decades, of how do we work through that. And we're finishing up an acquisition right now on one of those that's several hundred acres, and that the surviving spouse homeowner will be provided a space on 1 acre of that to live on comfortably. But the rest of it was going to go into salmon recovery efforts. We also believe that we're still in the mix we did a very significant ask, supported by Larson and many others, of I think we asked $60 million to look at relocating at least one of the major 3 pipelines, the Everett water pipelines that come in and cross the river. The one south of US 2, we could do a huge amount of habitat stewardship and enhancement if we were able to actually put that water line underground. That is not an insignificant process. Just relocating the water line itself is about a $38 million project. But we felt like if we as the county and federal and state folks could support it, that would be an easier lift for Everett if we could play a significant role in funding that. So that is something that's right now is still in the mix. It's not been fully funded. I know there's chunks that have been funded, several $1 million, but the ask was 60 million. And we're really swinging for the fences right now. We are really trying to be aggressive with the infrastructure packages. It can make a huge difference environmentally for our region for decades and decades to come by doing these projects. So that's probably enough for me. The ag, surface water, and parks, as much as I think we can be, we're hitting on all cylinders, but we're still understaffed. Parks in particular is definitely understaffed. So we will probably be bringing some information to you later this year with the idea that we may be going to the voters to approve a parks and natural resources bond and levy. This has not been vetted through the county council yet. We are having the discussions at the executive's office. There is concern that with all the other constraints on county budgets and everything else going on, We only have about 2.6% of the county general fund goes into the park system, net 2.6%. And what we're finding is that's probably about $4 million annually inadequate if you're really going to both fund the system effectively, staff it effectively, and do the build outs we're trying to do. That's not talking about REIT, that's just the general fund. And I'll do my quick little commercial. We all know, I've said it many times, in 1979, when I was a high school graduate from Linwood High School, the general fund was split about 50% between law, justice, the courts, jail, and 50% all the other general fund departments, all that stuff we do across the county. Now that is more like 80%, a little over 80%, law, justice, so courts, sheriff's office, jail, turns out about 81 point something, 82% is now that. So all these other departments, which have had massive growth over the last, 50 years, are now sharing roughly 18.8% of the budget. We also, during Aaron's tenure, and really for the most part, my whole 16 years here, rarely took the 1% that the county was allowed to do, a 1%, 0.01% addition to taxes. Aaron declined it 9 years in a row because nobody wants to pay new taxes. I get it. Problem is that now cumulatively over Aaron's tenure and a few other times we haven't taken that, just in my life cycle here at the county, is the equivalent of about $48 million a year of lost revenue that we don't take in. Every time you don't take the 1% and then you don't take it the next year and you don't take it the next year, you just don't do it because nobody wants to do taxes. And it doesn't have to be voted on. That's just the thing that the counties can do, is take that 1%. We didn't, I think 11 of the years I've been here. It's right now stands at about a $48 million debt. We didn't get that money. So we are very, very, very lean. And I'm finding that I was around when King County decided and came back from Chicago area, and King County, I was there for the first parks levy and bond, working with Forterra and Trust for Public Lands and putting that together with that team and doing it, and then kind of putting together how you work on that. So anyways, that is something we may be coming back to many of our nonprofits with over the next year or two, is the decision that, do we go out to the voters for a parks and natural resources levy, which can then more fully fund some of our initiatives that just aren't adequately funded. I know on the park side for sure, but then also some of our things we're going to be launching into potentially the community forest program. That's not really a county-based program. It's been more cities, green cities, those kind of things. But as a county, we want the bandwidth to be able to do that. So we're working through all of that. I'll be quiet now. Molly's fantastic. So Lisa was amazing and is doing great at the UW. Kudos to her. Molly comes in. We, picked her from a great list of candidates, but she came from Everett Community College. So she has really strong connectivity across the board in the county and really great skill sets and knowledge base. So she's kind of hard to believe, but upping our game even on some things. And she's very persuasive. So we are really enjoying her energy and her business acumen and her intelligence as she approaches what we do in the Office of Energy Sustainability. And there are some shifts too. I don't know if you're going to talk about Savvy Septic and some of that. We now have a new health department instead of a health district. So we're working very closely with them. Had a meeting 2 days ago with Executive Summers and Lacey and the new health department director and deputy directors. And we're really trying to make sure we coalesce a vision towards all those pieces that we each touch and really define who's doing what, how they're doing it, how quickly we can get it done and do it well. So
Tom, before I let you go, when do you anticipate having this big ask going before the voters? When do you anticipate that might be decided?
I think in a perfect world, and I know I'm being taped, so I will be somewhat,
circumspect.
Careful, yes, exactly. But in general terms, we have already started the conversations with the exec's office and very, very ancillary one-off conversations with council members. The thought process would be is you create a bond committee. You can't really on county time once you say you're doing this, you can't really talk about this. There's very strong protections for not using county-based resources or anything to pass any kind of bond or levy. So right now it's all conjecture, and I feel comfortable at least stating this. But typically that timeline is usually 1.5 to 2 years that you go from creating kind of a bond levy committee, citizen-led, and you ultimately move through a process of how do you determine what the most important things are, and what do those things cost, and what do you think the voters would pass, and what, all those things, how do you put together the planning structure? And so usually it's 1.5 to 2 to 2.5 years from start to where you may have something on a ballot. And quite honestly, about 70% of the time across the country, these measures don't pass the first time. And even there's only just over a 50% margin, I think, still where they pass the second time. So a lot of times it takes 2 or 3 times of putting it on a ballot. And then there's a whole strategy to that. When you're doing that, when you can qualify, you probably don't do something after a major presidential election where massive amounts of voters have voted. And then if you have to qualify against that number, like for most, referendums, those kind of things have to qualify. So there's always a cycle to that, on that 4-year window too, of where are you trying to place it so it has the best chance of getting the most positive voters out and not, overburdening it from the standpoint of past. So that's my best non-technical, but I would think that what we want to do is start working right now, again, there's people in our business community that want to see us have a strong environmental ethic and want to see spaces and want to see a lot of, diversity, equity, inclusion into how our approach is and how we're doing that and how are we preserving the habitat and, lowering our carbon footprint and all these things combined. How do you make it meaningful? So a good couple of years. It's not for the faint of heart. And quite honestly, right now, still around the country, more than half of those don't ever pass. So lots to think about.
Thanks, Tom. Molly, we're anxious to meet you, and sounds like you made an impact already within the department. So please go ahead and introduce yourself further and let us know what your vision is here.
Thank you, Joan. I appreciate the time, everyone's time today, and being able to speak to this body. Snohomish County does some really important conservation work. I am grateful to have joined the team in July. I took over from, as you mentioned, Lisa DeLude's extraordinarily capable leadership. I'm amazed to find myself in a position, honestly, where I can have this much impact. I told someone at a presentation the other day that I feel extraordinarily fortunate to be able to do intentional, chaotic good and get paid to do it. That's a pretty unusual thing for a human being to be able to say. And that's sort of where I ride this. So I'll just I think everybody here probably is familiar with the Office of Sustainability for Snohomish County. It's seated under DCNR, which is a relatively new department, but it's a great collaboration between Parks, Swim, Ag, and OES. OES manages a wide variety of collaborative environmental and emissions reduction programs across the county, both community-wide and interdepartmentally for the county. We have the Sustainable Operations Plan for Snohomish County, which has some very, very challenging targets ahead of it to reduce county emissions, bring on EV vehicles and equipment throughout all the county departments, and a host of other initiatives that are the county's going to be challenged by it, both by funding and by action. But I see that it's something we can do. And there are a great many departments I've met with, even though I've only been with the county 8 months. I've met with a bunch of departments who are actually willing and actively pursuing these goals, which I was grateful to see. That doesn't always happen in a large agency. It's hard to do. It's hard to bring everybody together towards these big overarching climate change goals. Another really large climate change goal that we're working on right now is that, and this developed in my first month on the job, is the Interdepartmental Climate Resiliency Committee. And that is a group of 30 Snohomish County departments who are collaborating across the county government to ensure that things like the Snohomish County Comprehensive Plan contain climate change and resiliency efforts. Also, emergency management for Snohomish County is incorporating that into their plans. So what that means is when things like the Bolt Creek fire happen, we're looking at that from a whole county perspective and trying to figure out ways to mitigate the changes that are creating fires, wildfire, and increased emissions across the county. Alongside that, we're looking at the county's response to those sorts of things. So here's an interconnected piece you might find interesting. I currently am seeking a grant to upgrade the buildings at the Evergreen Fairgrounds to a higher level of efficiency and ensure that they're operational. And that sounds great, right? Makes the fair better, right? Except when you consider that those very same fairgrounds were used to house emergency firefighters during the Bolt Creek fire. So we have this tremendously aging infrastructure. Some of those buildings, we don't even have build dates on them. They're so old. So we have this tremendously aging, out of date, highly inefficient infrastructure at a critical piece of county, on a critical piece of county property that's used not only for the public, but for emergency services purposes. So the focus of funding on that kind of stuff, it's exactly what Tom's talking about, the focus of funding on those kind of things that serve multiple avenues of the public good, and ensuring that when we do that kind of upgrade to infrastructure, that it meets high efficiency standards, and we're not adding to the GHG load, and that we're meeting all the policies and procedures and reduction targets. That's really important. So the ICRC group is a giant overseeing body, basically at the county, a whole bunch of us collaborating and ensuring those things are happening across the board, versus county departments being siloed, working in their own little lane, and then coming across something later that someone else is doing that's either overlapping and wasting money or non-collaborative. It was a little bit of a bumpy start. It took us about 2 months to get people to understand what we were trying to do. But now, as of last night, this was in a discussion and a briefing with Dave. I got a lot of head nods during the briefing, although it wasn't actually about this group, but I got a lot of head nods. So we're getting some higher level executive support of the group. It was sort of grassroots, honestly. Started with Eileen Canola in PDS. Sort of sought me out when I first started and asked me to facilitate this. And it's become a large, accepted, and kind of motivating group of people who are working across the county interdepartmental boundaries, which I'm really excited about. OES has a host of programs. There's two that I kind of wanted to highlight to you today. Tom mentioned that Savvy Septic is moving out of OES. It's been a great program to manage. I've deeply enjoyed it. I'm fully committed to making septic systems in Snohomish County healthy, because they're a real problem for the water table and associated streams and the environment if they're not healthy and maintained correctly. I feel like Regina Gray and her team are very capable folks. I don't know if this group knows it or not, but Snohomish County is the only county in Washington state that did not have the Savvy Septic program embedded in the health department. We were the only ones where it was being managed through the Office of Sustainability. So this is a natural fit for them. We've spent the last 8 months planning for this transition. We've got about 4 more months to fully transition it over to the health department, but I have 100% confidence in them. They've actually already made improvements on the program, which I'm really grateful for. So the two things I wanted to highlight to you today, there are some really large overarching programs that I can touch on as well, but the two things I wanted to highlight are the Healthy Forest program, which recently transitioned to Snohomish County from Forterra as a contractor. Their contract ended for this project in December. We opted to bring this program into the county and manage it internally. We've hired a brilliant young person who has a degree in forestry to manage this program. They have made incredible headway with the program already. They've inducted, in their 1 month on the job, I think 3 or 4 additional volunteers and a couple of park stewards. This program focuses on about 10 county parks, and it's modeled after the Green Cities program. It's a challenge. This model was intended for interurban parks. It was not intended for county parks, which, as you all know, interurban parks they get visited by folks who live around them largely. But county parks are destinations, right? So the people that live around Kayak Point, for example, they go to Kayak Point, but so do people from Seattle and Issaquah and Mount Vernon and Bellingham and all kinds of places. So to get a core volunteer group in a park like that is really challenging. Those parks tend to be a lot more wild and woolly than the interurban parks, sort of by nature. So right now we have 10 parks that we intend to enroll in this program and have a 20-year plan. But right now, 4 of them are receiving our direct focus. That's McCollum, Picnic Park, Meadowdale Beach, and Lake Stickney. They most closely model the type of park that this program was originally designed for and that this program was modeled after. And then as time goes on, and Jay, who is the person managing the program, onboards more volunteers and gets interest in the outlying parks, we will enroll those parks as well. So it's a large program. It's got a lot going on. And it'll be fun to see what happens as it expands under the county's direct influence. I'm looking forward to it. The second program I wanted to talk to you about launched December 26th, and it's the Snohomish County Sea Pacer program. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's the commercially assessed property efficiency program. And basically it's a program that allows commercial businesses, multi-unit housing developers, and other folks to get very advantageous loan terms to do efficiency upgrades on their properties. I see your note, Kate. Yeah, I am facilitating the efforts of the Climate Advisory Committee. We've met a number of times since I started. I can touch on that as well. So the Sea Pacer program launched, as I said, December 26th. We have actually already received a couple of applications on the program. In fact, Tom, one of them sitting in your inbox waiting for approval today.
Yeah, I gotta, there's a new way of signing that. So I'm looking at the instructions.
That's right.
I'm such a great computer savvy person that I.
This is a pretty exciting program. Honestly, I really like what it does. I like the fact that the loan is between the lender and the property owner. It doesn't use any government money and it stays with the property. It's also a senior loan. So that means it gets paid off first. So it makes it really advantageous to, and lenders like it. It's longer loan payback terms. So it makes the Sea Pacer funder improvements cash positive sooner than traditional loans. It has lower interest rates. Oh, that's interesting. And it reduces the building's greenhouse gas footprint over time and for a long time. And there's lots of different efficiency efforts that can get you approved for a Sea Pacer loan. So just to explain a little bit of context, the county doesn't have any funding enrolled in this. We're not doing anything with money. What we're doing is we receive the application and we review it for completion and to ensure that the certifications involved for the efficiency measures are true and accurate and signed on the dotted line, that we have all the qualifications from the lender. We basically assess the application, review it. We look at it and approve it. We send it to Tom for signature, then it goes back to the bank, and the agreement and the funding is between the lender and the applicant. So the county is just making sure that these agreements and these loans actually do what they're supposed to do, which is save energy and, help to save the environment over the long term. So OES is also working on some really large projects, some that haven't really gone out for publication yet. And like Tom, I know I'm being recorded, but I really want to tell this group about it. So we're working on a land conservation initiative. It's a large overarching project that is currently under scope draft with a contractor to develop a 20-year plan to purchase, to acquire properties in Snohomish County with the intent of conserving them, both for agriculture and for other conservation property, for other conservation purposes. So Within that program is a TDR, a transfer demand rights bank that's under development, an exchange program. You can take a look at the one in King County if you're interested in how those really work. Basically, it allows ag landowners to sell their development rights to the county so they can be held or transferred so that the development happens in an urban core and reduces urban sprawl. It's a very interesting program. I am so excited to be working on it and a part of it. I feel really fortunate that I get to have this kind of impact in my community by working for Snohomish County and under DCNR, and with folks who, in my opinion, even as a very sort of new person to the county, although I'm not new to Snohomish County, I for 35 years worked in both law enforcement and then for higher ed in the sustainability field. I'm really fortunate to be where I am. And I think that DCNR, the put together of this department from my very strategic point of view, it's kind of how my brain works, is a smart move on behalf of the county. They've put together a group of departments and people who work for these departments who are really deeply interested in collaboration in saving the environment. That's hard to do in a big government agency. It's hard to get that kind of laser focus on this really important issue, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. Joan, I think you're muted.
I was just saying how exciting it is to have you aboard. We can feel that positive energy, and it's a time when we need to hear or feel that flow, and really appreciate your enthusiasm. Keep it up and keep on inspiring us with that. And you and Tom together, I think that's quite a combo. And it sounds like you're collaborating with a lot of other like-minded people to make it. And the fact, I was terribly impressed, Tom, having dealt with Burlington Northern myself at various times, the fact that you were able to get their cooperation to make Meadowdale Park accessible and work for people. I just thought that was wonderful. We do have a number of questions that went into the chat. I'm not always good at catching all of those, but I did see that there were some. Carol McMahon had a couple right up front, and then Kate also had some to add. I think, Carol, yours were for Tom. Is that correct?
Yes, they were. They are. Should I start?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, Tom, my question was going to be, does the county DCNR budget match the commitment, which is the vision mission? But you had already given us some information about a bond. So the question instead is, will the bond be committed solely to DCNR and not given at any time to the law and justice budget, which has taken over funds from different departments in the past? So I'm wondering if it would be ironclad for DCNR.
Yeah, in fact, whenever you're going to do a bond or a levy, you have to be very clear about what you're going to spend the money on, both from a standpoint of fiduciary responsibility, and yes, you can only, when you're collecting it for XYZ, it gets spent on XYZ, but also the likelihood of passing any levy or bond measure is completely determined by voters understanding where their money will go, how it will be used, and quite honestly, a timeline. It is never a blank check. You should be accountable to the voters. If you say, here's what we're going to do, and here's our plan for a 6-year levy, this is what would be accomplished. There's always a startup phase, but beyond that, then there should be already a very aggressive plan in place, and that's what we would package in the levy and bond. And they're two distinct things. You can pass a bond and not pass the levy, but what I have found in, again, almost 40 years in public service is it's important to pass both, because the bond gives you those capital dollars to make investments to do really important things. That's great. The levy gives you the corresponding maintenance and operation funds to actually staff those programmatically, those spaces, and or make sure that things are then going the right direction. And I will say King County is one of those amazing models where, I came in 3 months before we passed that very first bond back in 2003 and levy. And they've actually grown that. Now, they do invest with all 39 cities and towns. They do use bond funds as well as the levy funds to invest in Woodland Park Zoo, in the Seattle Aquarium, in things. And so they've never not passed that levy and bond. And it's now in a 6-year cycle. The first one was 4 years and it was 6 years. We don't have quite the same assets to invest in. We certainly are talking the same number. The last bond that they passed 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I guess, you know, parks and their Department of Natural Resources and Parks did a lot of testing and came out with about a $620 million 6-year bond levy package. The executive's office looked at it and increased it by 100 million to 720 million. The council looked at it, and ultimately what they pushed to voters was just over 800 million. I think it was in fact 820 million 6-year levy and bond for parks. And the way they pass it is they are co-investing with the cities too. They got the urban voters, the Seattle voters, Bellevue voters, Kent voters. So everybody was like, okay, great. That's going to help this project, this project, this project. It gets those things done. They spread it out really well. So we would be emulating that, where we have to be making sure we're doing stuff both in the urban core as well as in our more regional parks, as well as with our regional trails, things that people want to see get done. So yeah, I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I think that was well done. Thank you. I have a couple more unless somebody else wants to jump in, and I can come back.
I think there were a couple about this goal of trying to move the pipeline. And I think that probably bears a little further explanation too. Carol, I know one of them was yours. Do you want to act? And that looks like Kate had part of that too.
I had two relative to that, and they can probably be answered with one. So whoever wants to jump in, but predominantly this was originally to Tom. Is the water pipeline project you mentioned earlier supported by any of the county council members, and which of those are they? And would the water pipeline project and the fairgrounds project be considered public safety for budget resources? Because I, for one, happen to believe that health is part of public safety, and these things contribute to health.
Yeah, that's, and quite honestly, in order to get funding and be successful, you have to give multi-benefit on every one of these projects. And so you're right, there's an environmental, huge environmental opportunity there. There is a public safety opportunity. There's also an efficiency. There's also resiliency from the standpoint of both having that pipeline not exposed, not to a place where it could be damaged by someone on purpose, or, we're seeing all these very, overt opportunities at trying to disrupt power pipelines, going out to substations and damaging things. That's not something people imagined from PUD or other places, that someone would on purpose go out and try to disrupt your power distribution. So, we really are looking ahead. And so you're right, there is both the public safety, there's the human health, there's the environmental piece. And then again, the fairgrounds, for the fairgrounds, we already got some level of investment in the fairgrounds based on the fact that during COVID, it was the first place that we housed, we brought our PPE warehousing out there. So we had all the protective gear coming in. We also brought out one of our first testing stations in the county out to the fair park. And we brought out the vaccination station to the fair park. Then we added housing and doing that at the fair park. It actually is designated as one of our major emergency management sites. So when we talk about moving forward with projects like the pipeline project or others, yes, all of those big projects tick many boxes. Even Meadowdale was able to tick several of those boxes because, quite honestly, we've helped BNSF help themselves. They have a much more resilient rail line now with this 110-foot trestle that's been all redone. It's brand new infrastructure. It's not 100 years old. It's more resilient than when you have a creek being stopped up and backing up. I mean, I have pictures 6 years ago of salmon in the porta potty enclosure because we had 3 feet of water at the base of, Meadowdale Beach. That's not great for your rail line long term. So you are absolutely correct. It's all about multi-benefit, and that investment being leveraged multiple ways, and then being co-invested by multiple streams of funding that are legitimate to spend even in one location together because they have the multi-benefit. So that is where we're going.
And the other part of that was, are there any council members supportive of your effort with the water pipeline?
They haven't been fully briefed in a public setting. Certainly, I have a monthly meeting with every council member. And I've got to tell you, even through Aaron's term and John Lovick's term and now Dave's, Parks is one of those things that touches so many people. I have always been allowed to do that. I'm the one department head that Aaron Reardon allowed for a number of years to just meet with council every month. These are touch points for the public that are so important. So they certainly are being made aware and have been made aware in the last couple meetings that I've had with them that, hey, we're going to be looking at this process. It will be an executive-led process. It is coming out of the executive branch. It will, you know, but it's important that you have many touch points and many informal, you know, frank and yet private conversations to say what would be important to you, why would it be important, what would this look like. It is always a negotiated end game. But I will say that our council members all get it. They may have different areas of passion and very different areas of focus, but in just my initial conversations, I would say that all of them are very interested in putting something in front of the voters. The voters could actually choose and say, that gives them their own mandate. That gives them their own, you know, ability to say, yes, we love this. This is great. It's important to do. Do we have all the funding to do it? No. Are we going to ask our public to co-invest with us? You know, and if I don't see any of them having a problem with the ask.
Kate, I noticed you had a number of questions, and then please, I see Julie has her hand up too. I'm just kind of taking the first ones I saw in the chat over here, but I'm going to move myself so I can look and see if anybody else has their hand up. I did have one quick question, Tom. I had a friend who wanted to go to the Meadowdale celebration of opening, but she couldn't, she's not able to walk down that trail, which, you know, is extremely steep, and then be able to get back up again, going down and up. And there was no visible notice for her of the ADA access of how she could have gotten to into the park and then to that part. So I'm wondering about the signage for people who have that need.
Yeah, it's, well, on our website, it's always been there, but there is an ADA access that is down, you know, come through the residential neighborhoods there along, and there's a gate there. There's a code to the gate that is provided to people with ADA placards or people that are, you know, want to come in and use it as an ADA access. So typically the rangers handle making sure those communications are made. Because we don't want the general public overall to use the lower parking, but it's always been an ADA parking area. There's about 6 spaces down there. We've expanded that a bit, and again, so it is available. And there are 2 different codes. One is a general park code that goes to every gate. I will never give that code out. The other code we can talk about how I disseminate that, because again, we've done it really as an individual piece. So we have a couple hundred of folks that use the park pretty regularly with ADA accessibility needs, and they do come in through that gate. And
I
that
mentioned
road,
that there was another entrance. I knew that, but I will tell her to go to the parks online to be able to access that. So thank you. That was just a quick question, but I just wanted to make sure others. It's not really apparent at the main entrance to the park, and it is a very not accessible for people with disabilities to go down there and back up again.
true.
Okay, Kate, I think you were next, and then Julie. Excuse me. Kate,
Kate, are
you're
you
pulling the mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to Tom and Molly for being here. It's really been fascinating. And I'm wondering, there seems to be a considerable amount of federal funding for climate mitigation. And there is certainly a will in the state legislature, and we have the Climate Commitment Act, and the DNR urban and community force has been beefed up, and they're hiring like crazy. And I'm wondering if you have reached out to them, have you identified some resources that would help us with protecting some habitat corridors, significant trees, whether on private property or public property within the urban growth area, especially Southwest urban growth area, where we feel like we're being kind of targeted by the builders because they all want to live next to King County, so they don't have to drive quite as far and it's a little bit cheaper. And it just seems like we've been thrown to the wolves. And there are some major habitat corridors in this part of the county that could be protected. I'm not saying you can just grab anybody's land, but if we go to talk to them and talk about a plan, a strategy, maybe you could help us with that. Do you have any tools and resources for that from DNR?
That's
Well,
exactly what go ahead, Tom.
No, go ahead, Molly. You go first, and then I'll.
That's exactly what the LCI program is designed to do. Exactly what it's designed to do is help the county first identify and prioritize those sorts of properties, and then develop a funding stream. And we're working on that too, even though the program hasn't actually been fully even scoped yet. But there are people on my team who are actually seeking out that funding now, because now is when the funding is available. And so even though we don't have our 20-year plan in place, we're chasing the money like crazy through the Climate Commitment Act. However, the LCI, the intent of that program is to target priority conservation properties for eventual acquisition and preservation by the county. That's exactly what it's designed to do. And Kate, to what you said, the county, there's no intention on the part of the county to try and make somebody sell anything. That's not how it works. But if people are willing to do so, and we can purchase stuff for conservation for later generations and for other purposes and for saving the environment, we're going to do it. So
that
right
is
now,
really good news.
yeah, right now we have. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it does seem that there's a big effort on the Little Bear Creek corridor and a lot of the Raya 7, I think, that has inter-county interest and resources and all that. But we over here in the Southwest urban growth area feel like we're kind of getting dropped.
Squeezed.
Well, I mean, the builders are able to build because that's how our laws are. And there's nothing to stop them.
Right.
Until we put that land out of availability.
Mm-hmm.
So Kate, the other thing I'll add to that is we have been doing some due diligence and research on a number of properties for the last like 3.5, 4 years, because they've come up. Different folks have brought individual properties to us and said, hey, what about this? And what about that? And this one's close to Frognall, or this one's close to here, or this one's close to, where they just developed a bunch of homes. And so we do look at that. We also then take a really good look at both the LiDAR, we look at all the topo, we look at what's already protected, because there's a few properties that really have steep slopes. And even some of them that are DNR owned, the DNR can sell that. They absolutely can and have in some cases. There are some areas that would be protected. Now there's an ongoing discussion about some of the areas that were sold in the last 8, 9, 10 years, and then started being developed much later on. Were they fully compliant, and was all of the calculations tied to slopes and everything else safeguarded? And that is an ongoing kind of argument, and in some cases litigation. But so what we've done is looked at places that are the most at risk. What kind of public benefit do they have? Because we have conservation futures, and we've looked at it first with that. Now that we've created LCI, we wanted to create a whole nother funding scenario that doesn't have to talk about, kind of having the public access piece. It may absolutely just be for preservation, and not the idea that anybody's going to be on it. It just is preserving it. So, and that's another thing that we'd be talking about in any kind of bond or levy, is a percentage of funding that would go to then just preservation, not because anyone's ever going to be on it or recreate on it or do anything on it. It just simply lock it up. Now you can do some of that with conservation futures already, and I think we've got about 8 million, 7 million left in a bond that we did a couple of years ago that we're doing a funding round this year again. So we are encouraging again many of our known landowners and others, most of whom are inside the UGAs, they're inside city limits in many cases, to apply for that funding. I'll tell you that some of our city partners have already told us just in the last 2 weeks is we've kind of said, hey, we're convening the Country Future Advisory Board probably in April. We'll be doing a funding round this summer. We want to be making the final decisions and looking at moving money out the door this year. Several of the cities have said, we want to do this, but we don't have the maintenance operation funds. We don't have the ability to just even take care of it or patrol it or do anything with it. So we're working through that too. And we don't know if in LCI, there's ways that we can co-invest with people. We still have 9 park locations that are already inside city limits. Really per Growth Management Act, everything, we're trying to hand these to the cities, like Southwest County Park. Okay. Yeah, we got that from the UW, 90 years ago. But it's inside the city of Edmonds. City of Edmonds has actually been including it in their parks inventory and their open space for 25 years. But we're still maintaining the site, so we're working with the city and saying, hey, we got to hand this to you guys, and we get it. You're probably going to spend $30,000, $40,000 a year on maintenance and operations, but it's way better to be in the city. We can get there. And even ultimately Meadowdale, for as much as we've just spent $20 million and we've invested our heart and soul into making sure we got that park improved, eventually that probably goes to the city of Linwood. They've got other assets right around it. We've helped them buy property around Meadowdale Beach in the last decade. So, and it's in Linwood's UGA more than Edmonds. So you're right. I guess there's a lot of stuff we never talk about much in public, that we are connecting with all 19 cities and towns and nonprofits and advocacy groups like yours and saying, okay, what makes sense? How best do we do this? How do we both preserve properties? And those properties are now becoming even more important. They were always important, but now we're seeing that these spaces, these little islands are really going to be critical. And so we are looking at, like community forests, and a lot of programs have been created that are very city centric. Quite honestly, when you talk about urban tree canopy, just calling it urban tree canopy, it invokes the idea that you're doing this in city settings and you're heat mapping, and we're getting all this great data, all this stuff tied in. But the fact is, the county does have a role in that, and we do want to help preserve and protect lands. But when we do it, then we also want to be able to say, we can be a key funder in buying the asset, protecting the asset, but we also are already underwater on our maintenance and operations side. So if we're lucky enough to preserve property, and it's inside city limits, we also want to hand it to you, city. We want this to be something we do together, because we should not be managing a whole lot of properties inside the city limits. We should help you get them. And we've done that for decades. But because right now, I think we've got, like I say, 6 or 7 key properties that, it's not tons of money, but it's probably a couple $100,000 a year of maintenance and operations that we do on those in-city properties. And it's, nobody wants to take, even Esperance Park. We redeveloped Esperance Park because we were working with the city on, okay, how do we transfer this to you? And it's not just the parks. The problem is, in Esperance, Public Works and the Sheriff's Office spend quite a bit of money because it's a donut hole. You go from outside the city, into the city, through the city, into this donut hole that's county. So it is the Sheriff's Office, it is Public Works, it is. So parks, we took the lead and said, we're going to redevelop Esperance Parks. We're going to do it with the city of Edmonds, so they know what the playground meets all their standards. So when we hand the park off, it all makes sense, right? It's good. They already have it in a maintenance operation plan. We completed the park 3 years ago. And, the city's been a little interested in getting the park, but they don't want to take on the roads and law enforcement. Well, it's, those are the kind of silly things. And the city's great. We work with a lot of their people, a lot of their electeds. They're great to work with. They've been big advocates on Meadowdale, but, so is Linwood, everybody has. But we have those places where we really need to have ongoing productive conversations. And that part of that is absolutely saving, or enhancing these tree stands, these green corridors, these lifeways, these whatever we want to call them inside city limits that really do need to be protected. And if we don't do something really in the next handful of years, most of those are going to be lost. There's no way around it.
Thank you, Tom. And Julie, you've been very patient, so I'd like to be sure we give you a chance here and move forward here.
So my question is for Tom, and I live in the Arlington area where It took like more than a decade to pass a school bond to build a new high school. So there's that background, but also taxpayers' attitudes are changing in our area that you need to be aware of, because the Snohomish tribe has pulled off, well, 5 years ago, they had 1,000 acres of land that they put into tribal trust land, which then they don't pay any taxes on for things like schools and, you know, your county park bond. And just recently they've applied for 100 acres in our neighborhood to be turned into tribal trust land. So the bonds that have been passed, the rest of us now have to pay more per $1,000 of valuation than we were told we were ever going to have to pay. So liberal voters like me, who used to say yes to schools, fires, hospitals, are now saying, well, wait a minute, you know, these tribal people are living in these houses and they're using these services, but the tribe is not paying their share for these. So my question to you is, have you ever thought about asking the tribes up front before you guarantee to the voters how much we're going to have to pay per $1,000 evaluation? Have you ever asked them if they will agree to pay what they would have if that land wasn't trust land first? So the citizens around them know that they are paying their fair share. And I know the county
Sure,
gets
yeah.
a chance to comment on all these trust land things, but the county's hands are tied because all the county can say is, yeah, we're going to lose this many thousands of dollars a year for school, for county and surface water management. That's all you can say.
Well, actually, so we have pretty good connectivity with our tribes right now. Certainly it's still a Snohomish tribe and the Tulalip tribe. A lot of that is because of Dave and his relationship, long-term relationship, you know. And so we do have consultations, official consultations now on at least a quarterly basis and typically almost a monthly basis. So it can be something we bring up. The other thing that I guess I'd have to say is that, like in this, in the last cycle of both the federal as well as state funding, and in this long session, we are absolutely working together and coordinating requests and asks that can co-blend tribal and county-based funding to a common goal. So they are coming in and supporting our initiatives, and we are supporting many of their initiatives so that they are co-investing along the way. Doesn't solve the tax piece, that's for sure. It doesn't change that, but it does get the fact that, like right now, we're doing it on at least 4 different grant proposals and things where the tribes are pushing to get funding for salmon recovery or habitat stewardship, or, you know, well, culverts is a great one. You know, we've got whatever 900 culverts that are county-based culverts in the county, and then you've got all the ones with WashDOT and lots of the city ones and all that. We work together, so we're trying to enhance. I mean, 900 culverts, and if you're doing 3 a year, which was what we used to be doing, you know, you're not going to get your piss patches culverts figured out over the next 100 years. So we started being more aggressive on it. We applied for things together, and now they do the work when it's private culverts. They've kind of committed to doing that work, and they got funding for, I think, doing 11 or 12 private culverts, and we've got funding to do, I think, another 7, you know, more public culverts, and we're doing those. The good news is we are working with them quite a bit. So we're starting on river systems, starting from the Salish Sea and working our way up. So instead of what used to be kind of a haphazard, well, we got money for this culvert, do that. But, you know, there's 5 other salmon that they're non-passable culverts between the Salish Sea and that culvert. It's like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. It's great to get that culvert done, but if you're not going to do the other 4 culverts in the next 20 years, the salmon are never going to get to that one. So the good news is we're working together on a number of fronts. I don't think anyone has had that maybe frank question or pose it the same way you just posed it, of how do we get some surety if we are doing, you know, bonds or levies, that the tribes will be contributing. And what we found with Tulalip in particular, sometimes it isn't based on the legal requirement. It's based on a goodwill approach to, do they co-invest? And that doesn't give you surety, though. That never gives anyone surety that over the course of a 20-year bond that they would always be part of that team.
I think it's something you need to address before you present the bond to the public, because the voters in this area now have been educated to know what's happening. And,
Yep.
you know, And then my other question is for Molly. We live on with a septic tank system. So what does a savvy septic tank mean for us?
Well, Savvy Septic is, there's a couple of pieces, actually, you should be talking to Regina Gray from the health district now, but I can tell you because, the program was just under us. So Savvy Septic has a couple of different modalities. One is a part of the program that's sort of a direct rebate to customers, and any customer can apply for it. It's wide open. You can either get risers installed for your septic system, or you can get a septic inspection and maintenance program. Both of those things are, and I'm going to talk and try to find the link and put it in the chat for you as I do this. So pardon me. Both of those things are easy to do and directly rebated to the customer. So let me pull Savvy Septic up for you. Thought I had it open. Oh, I do. Okay, here we go. Let me put this in the chat. So the secondary part of the program is for actual septic replacement. And Dave allocated $1 million in ARPA funding this year to that program. So the program prior was dependent on about $50,000 a year from surface water management, and then LIHEAP and other funding through grants. So that $1 million will do, total septic replacements are about $25,000 to $35,000 a piece. So people that apply through the program, if they're eligible, could get a grant. Basically, the county would pay for their septic replacement.
Wow.
Right. But you can do the math. $1 million doesn't go very far in today's, honestly, and I'm just being totally upfront. $1 million doesn't go very far in today's construction economy. 5 years ago, we could have done a lot of septic replacements for that money. They were in the, I don't know, $18,000 to $20,000 range, but costs have increased by about $15,000 in the last 2 years, all construction costs across the board. We're seeing that in our weatherization program as well. The weatherization program that's under Office of Energy and Sustainability for low-income housing weatherization. We are meeting demand, but it's a very narrow thing because our grants are being so impacted because all of our grant budget development was based on, construction costs that didn't go absolutely crazy over a 2-year period. They construction costs just went right along with housing costs when things went sort of berserk in the market. I'm hopeful that things will stabilize a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I'm the Sally Pie in the Sky girl, I guess. I'm hopeful that things will stabilize a little bit and we'll get a little more bang for our buck. So the Savvy Septic program link is in the chat. If you want to disseminate that, I'd be grateful because this stuff directly impacts our water. I remember being, about 14, and I was in a science class, and the instructor said, yeah, anything you pour on the ground goes into your drinking water. And my mind went, direct inception for how I ended up where I am today, right?
We're running out of time with these
Okay.
two wonderful people, and I just really am excited that we've actually had you and Tom here to speak to us to initiate this year, because you're right where we want to be and doing things that we want to hear about. So I'm going to ask that we try to reach out to you yet again coming up in the future. And one of the things I've thought about a little bit, we do field trips in the summer. June, July, and August, we get out of our Zoom mode and we try to get out where you are. And so either we come to your offices, Tom, I'm not sure your new office is not at the county buildings, is it? Or are you, Molly? I'm not sure where your offices are any longer, but we could come and hear more and see at the same time. And that's what the getting out of our seats and on our feet is all about during those months. And so I will put that out to you to think about. And it's June, July, and August. You think about which month might be the best, and we'll make it a date that we can put on our calendar. And because there's just far more for for us to discuss than we can do within this time frame. But oh, I'm so glad to meet you, Molly. I'm so excited to have you on board. Tom, it's just reassuring to see you overseeing all of this, knowing how many years we've been doing these things together and now and in the past. So there were a couple of other things that I think are important too, is getting information out to the public. And Carol asked quite a bit about mapping, maps of the culverts, the issues. I just have a lot to Linda Matthews. I noticed she's leaving, and she's our person who's our tech, and she's going to be working over this tape portion. I'm going to stop taping when it gets to our regular portion of our meeting here, and we will edit this this version and try to make it available to other members and to the league itself as a whole piece on YouTube. And you guys can go and see yourselves again if you so desire. So thank you both very much. You're welcome to stay with us. And I do hope that there are some chat questions if you'd like to answer those at your leisure, and send them an email. I can send them out to everybody and do that. So
Joan, thank you very much for
well,
having.
this is no,
Yeah,
we're the ones to thank you, and I'm just glad to have that excitement generated again. So anyway, I'm going to stop the recording portion here.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thanks,
I probably will jump off.
me too. I have a hard stop.